Hello and welcome to the Drama This Way podcast. I am the host and producer, Liz Church, and today we're going to be discussing the critical role of Lambert House, a pioneering LGBTQ youth center in Seattle, Washington, with Brandon Knox, the organization's program director. And since 1981, Lambert House has been a beacon of hope, providing essential support to LGBTQ youth as they navigate mental health struggles, loneliness, and a range of societal challenges. But I'm not going to go too in depth of what we're going to be discussing today because I want to highlight this organization and the great things that they do. So, Brandon, I'm going to give you the floor, my dear. So let's dive into the brief history of Lambert House and how you found yourself joining Lambert House.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's amazing to be here and quite the privilege. And I love talking about Lambert House. So this is going to be a really fun conversation. I'll talk about how I found Lambert House first, because I think it's a really fun story. I grew up in a small town in southern Washington that is more conservative than Seattle, to say the least. It didn't feel comfortable or safe for me to be out. And in fact, there were two older gay guys that were bullied and harassed and didn't really have great stories. And that told me, it was really not safe for me. So I came to Seattle for school. I went to the University of Washington, started making friends, came out, started building my life as a young adult. And while I was exploring the city on a bus, I think actually up near Sandpoint, I overheard these two teens talking about this place that was the only place they felt like they could be themselves. They were so happy that they found it and that it existed for them, and they didn't know what they would do without it. And they said the name Lambert House once, and I was like, They didn't say what it was, but I just knew I had to check it out and figure out what this place was. So I found the website, saw that it was an LGBTQ youth drop-in center, and I showed up a week or two later, just after I turned 20. And during my orientation, the executive director, Ken, noticed that I was new, introduced himself, and I said, I'm here to make friends. I don't really have any queer friends, but I'm also a student leader on campus. I plan events. I'm an RA, and I'd like to help out if there are ways for me to do that. And so he got me started on some volunteer projects. I also went to the Boys Who Like Boys group, had dinners, went to dances. I produced a dance with another youth. And my senior year, I actually got college credit for producing a 9-month leadership and activism seminar series.
I love that so
And
much. Sorry.
no, you're
That's so
good.
wonderful.
It was a lot of fun. I'm still kind of amazed that I did that at 21 years old. And I learned a lot. I made friends there that I'm still connected to this day. And Lambert House was really a part of me becoming comfortable with myself and really embracing that part of my identity. After that, I went off and worked in higher education for a while at the University of Nevada, Reno and Central Washington University, where I got to work with lots of college students, including LGBT student clubs and leadership clubs, and came back to join the staff at Lambert House in 2014. So I actually just started my 11th year in August, which is pretty
happy
exciting.
anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. We went out and had a great dinner as a staff. It was a lot of fun.
That is fantastic. I love that. So, as you've been with it for 11 years, you have to have seen some great growth within that time frame. I'm trying to do math in my
Absolutely.
head, like how long the organization's been alive. So, like 1981, that is
Yes.
43 years. If my math is right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Lambert House, it was founded by a pediatrician, Bob Deisher. He saw LGBTQ youth in clinical settings that were having higher rates of negative health outcomes than their straight and cisgender peers. And back then, the 70s and early 80s, most adults were not out, let alone youth. And so you can imagine how isolating that must have been for those teens. And he thought, as a pediatrician, if there was just a way to bring them together to make friends, they might have better physical and mental health outcomes. So actually a sort of a non-clinical approach to health. And I think that's because he must have understood what they really needed was to feel less isolated and feel less alone. And that is actually still at the core of how Lambert House operates today, which I can talk about. In the 80s, my understanding is that the organization didn't have necessarily a permanent home. I know at one point it ran a hotline for
Hmm.
teens from across Washington state to be able to call in. I've seen ads in archives of the Seattle Gay News about groups that the organization ran in the late 80s and early 90s. Um, and in 1991, there was an opportunity to get a grant for public funding through the city of Seattle to start leasing a space. And the organization was successful in that grant and moved into 1902 built Victorian House in Capitol Hill, the
Hmm.
historic LGBT neighborhood in the city, and began operating daily drop-in that space. And it was the first daily drop-in space for LGBTQ teens in the US. And I'm in the world, probably. Um, and we actually own that facility now, which is really fun. Um,
Mhm.
we're also responsible for the maintenance, but it's a very good thing for us. um, the organization actually was renamed Lambert House in the mid 90s after an important individual, Gray Lambert, who was a past board president and big supporter of the organization in the late 80s and early 90s. He actually passed away of HIV and AIDS related complications in the
Mhm.
early 90s. So it's great to have the name be a part of our legacy and the work that he and his family did, his father. And now, like I mentioned, we own the facility. We actually purchased it in 2016, thanks to a generous 0% interest loan from a private individual. And we were facing actually having to move because our landlords of 25 years were going to sell the building for redevelopment.
Mhm.
And so we're really lucky that we were able to purchase the property and stay. And now it's actually undergoing a major renovation. So we're in a temporary
Yeah.
location while that renovation is happening. But when we move back, we'll have about 43% more youth space, including a basement that doesn't flood.
Yes,
and
that's always fantastic.
yeah. And it'll be more earthquake safe. I mean, it's great all around, and it really will help us as we continue to grow and serve
Mhm.
more youth and serve youth in different ways.
Yeah, that is amazing. I love that. And I when I had reached out to you, we were going to try to see if we could try to fit you in for Pride Month to talk about youth during Pride Month, but you were like, "Wait, we're going under the renovation. I'll have to check back in soon." And I was so excited to hear about the renovation because I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great." And then I think what was it, September, you were like, "We're getting closer." It's fantastic. I love this. It's exciting things, but exciting news whenever we're getting moving forward to that point because you're able to do more and have more, and that's just really great for the community. So, if we before we get into talking about more about in depth of the challenges and such that you guys have faced, would you be able to talk about the positive things that you've noticed for youth in supporting the mental well-being in your 11 years that you've been there?
Absolutely. And, some of the trends that I've noticed have been slowly building trends even longer than I've been on staff, but I think in some ways they've accelerated. So Seattle is known as a very LGBTQ supportive city in general. It's sort of one of the more progressive cities in the country, which is amazing. And over the time that I've been on staff, and it's probably true for the decade prior, we've seen more and more supportive parents actually finding Lambert House for their child or their children. And it's great to see more parent support and that youth are supported at home. And still, over 90% of youth tell us their number one goal for coming to Lambert House is to find friends. And so that
Mhm.
need for social connection is still really strong. And that's really what we focus on. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
I love that. It's one of the reasons with having this conversation is talking about those support networks, building that community, and that is something that I feel like is incredibly important just in general. Like I live in North Carolina and LGBTQ spaces are very small, very hard to find. They're little niches and big spaces. So when you have a large community of people, you have a bigger chance to thrive. You have that network and you can go wherever you need to. And where I want to kind of shift a little bit is, finding that network can be really hard. And when you and I were talking about, things that you guys have seen innovative wise, so innovative in the sense of being able to reach more people. So, do you have the ability to kind of talk about the new programs that you guys have built and the strategies to reach more folks across King County? We'll start with King County first.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's something that our executive director has wanted to do for a very long time. And there's a relatively new voter approved fund called Best Starts for Kids that it's renewed, I think, every four years or up for a renewal vote every 4 years. And it's actually a tax to fund youth art and culture programming across the county. And we had an opportunity to apply for a grant through Best Starts for Kids to start new programs outside of the city in smaller and more rural communities where the need for
Mhm.
social support is even greater, where the social isolation is even greater, and where there may be less likelihood of family support or other resources in those communities for LGBTQ youth. Luckily, we were successful in that grant and we were able to hire a full-time staff member to join our team. Lori, she's been with us since 2019 and she's amazing. She came to us
Mm.
after a long history in foster care and helping to place foster youth in their forever homes. And she's incredible to work with. So she began recruiting volunteers and finding spaces to operate groups in communities that might serve that community, but also the surrounding, even smaller communities. And I think before the pandemic, in just 6 or 7 months, she had 9 new groups up and running, which is incredible.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah, she's quite amazing. And when the pandemic hit, we had to restructure a lot of things. But as we've been coming back to in-person programming over the last couple of years, we now have 5 groups in communities across King County with a little bit of a different focus. So we are still focused on smaller and more rural communities, but we're also
Mhm.
focused on majority BIPOC communities where there might be greater need for support. And she's doing outdoor rec opportunities and events in different locations across King County every month. So we've got sort of the stable groups, plus we have programming that moves around and is outdoor focused to provide those social opportunities in a little bit of a different way.
Mhm. And whenever you're talking about the rural areas, now obviously I am on the other side of the ship. You are in the northern part. I'm in the southern part. Now, from my understanding, from my work with Washington State, is that King County's really big as a county, and then you have the surrounding areas, and those areas can be harder to reach. Would you be able to kind of talk about how you guys expanded into those rural areas as well? Because I remember we were talking about during the pandemic that was tough, but you were able to overcome that.
Yeah, so King County is actually the seventh largest county in the United States by land area. It's huge. It goes from Vashon Island in Puget Sound all the way to Snoqualmie Pass, sort of the crest of the Cascade Mountains. And for those that are familiar with the area, from Bothell in the north all the way to Federal Way in the south, it's gigantic and really varied. I mean, you've got the densest urban area in the state, the city of
Mhm.
Seattle. And then you've got these very rural communities and farmland, especially in the east and the southeast of the county. And really, the way that that was accomplished is partially through Lori's network throughout her professional career and the networking that she started to do as soon as she joined the staff. King County Libraries are a great partner of ours. Many of
Mhm.
our groups are hosted in King County Libraries and are co-facilitated by teen librarians in those branches. But we've also recruited volunteers from the communities, members of the LGBT community who live in those rural areas, supportive allies who live in those areas. There have been a number of churches that have been supportive, where sometimes we've gotten like snacks or food donated for the groups, or volunteers have come from those church communities. So it really is actually leveraging the community that's out there that wants to see, what we're doing come to their community that's made it possible.
Hmm. Oh my goodness. See, this is all back to the community involvement. It's so fantastic, my friend. You're bringing everybody together to do the good things. this is what we're here for.
It's
So
what we're
I
good at.
want so I want to kind of dive into the last little bits of talking about maybe the little bit of the challenges, because when you were saying that the landlord was going to be selling the building and you had to try to gain ownership of that building, I'm sure that's something like hurdle that you guys have come across, and it kind of it kind of gets into the way of long-term goals, these little problems, these hiccups and things like that. So what kind of long-term goals has Lambert House sought out to improve the programs and the, what is the word I want to call, I don't want to say services because that sounds so silly, but the support that you all provide for LGBTQ youth?
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we have is that we actually don't have any dedicated fundraising staff. I mean, of course, our executive director leads fundraising for the organization, and he's really good at it, and we all assist. But we don't have any staff roles that are actually only focused on fundraising. And that's a bit of a challenge because when we need to grow, usually that requires resources, and it can take us a little bit longer to figure out how to get those resources. I would say we're also really lucky in that over 50% of our funding comes from individuals, people who care about our mission, many LGBTQ adults who might say something like, I wish this existed where I grew up or when I grew up, and they want to see it
Mm-hmm.
happen. And then increasingly supportive parents and other allies in our community. Employer matches are really great for us. We definitely benefit from those employer match programs either from volunteer time or from payroll donations. Um, but sometimes we're not able to scale as quickly as we would like to because we don't have that fundraising capacity in the staff exactly. And at the same time we were able to purchase our facility. We're one of only 5 standalone LGBT youth organizations in the country to own its facility. We did that without a
Mm-hmm.
dedicated fundraising team, and we did that because of the community. We have been able to expand the staff. When I joined Lambert House, it was me and the executive director full time. We have part time, we had part time staff, custodial, bookkeeping, and volunteers who are in part time staff roles that just didn't want to be paid. Um, Lori was the third full time staff person to join our team. And then we actually are hopefully in the process of hiring fourth for a position that's been open over the summer. And that is amazing growth that we've been able to have despite not having a dedicated fundraising staff position or even a fundraising team like some organizations have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we really focus hard on what LGBTQ youth need the most and sometimes overwork ourselves to that end. And so, we would love to continue to scale the staff to support the programming that we have. And then as it gets comfortable to continue to grow and serve more youth and serve youth in different ways.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's this little beacon of hope that we as societies, we grow and we progress into a better future. More and more communities will be able to do this exact same thing that everybody in your community is doing with Lambert House and other organizations more and more across the country. It's like heartwarming. I think that's the right word I want to use, and that's one reason I love that we're doing this episode, because we're entering tumultuous times. We've been on
Mhm.
this track for a while, but
Yeah.
like, this is my good time story and I love this. So thank you for being able to share it with us. But as we close out, I think this will be the nice little like call to action, maybe to boost others into, shaping their own communities this way to kind of grow. So what do you see as we progress into the future? Organizations like Lambert House, what do you think they can do to grow and address their own challenges in their own spaces?
Well, first, I think it really depends on the community that the organization is in and what the norms and culture of that community are. But I think really leaning into community can really act as a tremendous resource. It is rare to find an organization that, like Lambert House, uses a lot of volunteers. We have over 120 volunteers that facilitate our programs.
That's a
Uh,
lot. Holy smokes.
our drop-in center, dinners, online groups, in-person groups, outdoor rec, events. our team is actually huge when you include all of our volunteers, and that comes from our community. So I would say if you look at a model like that, that can really help you do more with your current resources. And those volunteers become ambassadors for the organization as well. Um, I would also say, pay attention to how the needs are changing in your community and be adaptable. Whenever we have new resources or, you know, there's a big shift in the community, we're always asking ourselves, what do youth need the most and how can we meet that need? Is it within our resources? Is it within our model? And if it is, we're going to go after that because we want we want to help youth who need it the most and in ways that they need it the most now.
We're closing on that. I'm not interjecting with anything else. It's like you're like the mic drop statement. I love that. But no, really though, thank you, Brandon, for coming and like giving us the good story, talking about everything that Lambert House does. What I would love to do for you guys is what kind of resources, or not resources, that's not the word I want to use here. How would you want people to find you? How would you want people to get involved with the organization?
Yeah, I would say for folks who live in the greater Seattle area, if you're interested in getting involved as a volunteer, we would love to have you. There's actually a lot of great information on our website, lamberthouse.org/volunteer. We do have a lengthy volunteer process because we want to make sure bringing in really great folks to work with the kids. And for folks who don't live in the area who want to support the work that we're doing, like I said, those donations from individuals, it's the majority of our budget and makes a huge difference for us. Even a small amount as a monthly recurring gift creates really great stability for us. So those are the two things I would say is if you're in the area and you've got the time to volunteer, definitely look at that or consider making a monthly gift of any size. Those are two fantastic ways to support us.
Fantastic. I will include them in the episode show notes, in the video, on the social, all the things. So
Awesome.
yes, everybody will be on the lookout for it.
Thank you so much.